information and content is great, but you're only going to keep people interested in your content for, a couple of minutes at most.
Hey, podcast listener, you're about to discover insider tips, tricks, and secrets to making more sales and converting more prospects into customers with email marketing. For more information about the Email Marketing Podcast or the Autoresponder Guy, go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast. Hey everybody, it's John McIntyre here, the Autoresponder Guy, and it's time for episode 2 of the Email Marketing Podcast, where we talk about the top tips, tricks, and secrets for making more sales and growing your revenue with email marketing. It's episode 2, the second episode, and today I'll be talking to Kyle Tully, a copywriter, consultant, and internet marketer, about the most important thing in email marketing. Now, here's a hint. It's not about writing emails, okay? Now, more about that in just a moment. To get the show notes for this episode of the Email Marketing Podcast, go to dropdeadcopy.com/EP2. Now, I want to make you a deal. This is the second episode of the EMP, that's the Email Marketing Podcast, and of course, I need some reviews. Now, in exchange for a review, I'll make you famous by reading out your review on next week's episode. So, here's how it's going to work. Step 1. Listen to this episode. Okay, now step 2, go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast and click on the review link. It'll take you to the EMP page in iTunes where you can leave a review and become famous. Simple, fun, and like I said, you're going to be famous. You're going to be a rock star. Now, anyway, it's time to get started. Let's go talk to Kyle Tully. It's John McIntyre here, the Autoresponder Guy. I'm here with Kyle Tully, a copywriter, consultant, and internet marketer. Kyle is the creator of Consulting Tycoon, a product that teaches people how to start their own 6-figure internet marketing consulting business. They get flooded with clients and make more money than most doctors. And I've been on his list for a while. I have purchased one of his products before, and he's doing some really great stuff. Kyle, how are you going today?
I'm really good, mate. Thanks for that intro. I love it.
No worries, man. Let's start off as we always do, and tell us a bit about who is Kyle Tully and what does he do? Yeah, sure. I mean, you kind of said it best. I'm best known as a copywriter and consultant, and over the past couple of years, I've been building out my Consulting Tycoon business, basically teaching other people, how I get my clients, how I structure the whole business, how I manage clients, and all that kind of stuff. And that's really been my focus for the last couple of years, just teaching other people, how to do what it is I do. And email marketing has certainly been a really big part of that. Okay, fantastic. So you send out daily emails. You do a range of things, and we'll get into that in a moment. But we were just talking before we hit record about how you believe that before you start sending emails, there is half the battle happens before that. So let's start there and tell us a bit about how do you frame up email marketing and what's the most important thing? Sure,
yeah. So I think one of the mistakes a lot of people make is, and this especially goes for my niche, being a consultant and marketing to regular business owners, the mistake people make is they're only getting name and email addresses of people. And as I said to you before, I kind of view it like buying real estate. You make your money when you buy, not necessarily when you sell. So with an email list, you make your money off the list when you're building that list, the data you get from the list. And so I'm really big on capturing full leads. So, name, email address, phone number, Skype contact number, mailing address, all that kind of stuff. And then even deeper than that, getting survey information and some much deeper sort of psychographic and demographic type of data out of that list. And I think that's where a huge opportunity is, especially with a lot of the new software that's available these days, like Infusionsoft and Office Autopilot. There's a ton of stuff we can do completely automated. And that's really half the battle. Sending out daily emails is fantastic. Being a great email copywriter is a massive leg up. But the other half of it is kind of the technical and functional aspect of how you build the list and how you set that side of it up. Okay. So do you find, though, that when you ask for more information, your conversion rate goes down? Yeah, it does. I mean, obviously, if you ask for name, email address, son's birth date, grandmother's maiden name, all that kind of stuff, conversion rates will go down. And the flip side of that is that the value of that list goes up. And the funny thing is, even if you, for example, if you collect name and email address plus postal address, even if you have no plans of ever sending a letter to that person or a postcard or any kind of direct mail or using that data at all, the simple fact that they gave it to you will make them a lot more valuable to you over the course of a lifetime. I've seen that happen in at least 3 or 4 different little businesses I've been involved in. The other part of that is that a big thing I've been doing lately is doing a multi-step opt-in process. So stage 1 might be just asking for name and email, or sometimes just email. And then the thank you page for that opt-in will be a second opt-in form where they can enter postal address. And then the next opt-in form might be some survey data like, what's the biggest challenge in your business, or what's your current revenue, or those kind of questions. And so we build it out like that so that everyone's going to enter name and email address just like they would in a regular opt-in form. The people who are more interested, more qualified, want to find out more are going to give you their postal address and so on. So it naturally starts to segment people based on how interested they are, and really makes knowing who to follow up with first and who to spend the most time and effort on much clearer. Whereas if you've just got name and email address, everyone's in the same bucket. You've kind of just got to go with brute force and try and figure out who's going to buy based on just sending as many emails as possible kind of thing.
Okay, so you're suggesting that people collect data like the postcodes and the address and those things, even if they're not going to use them?
Yeah, I've seen it so many times where I've had the best intentions and I've meant to send direct mail in various business things, and we just never got around to it. However, when we look at the data, a year later, the people who gave us their postal address have bought, anywhere from 2 to 10 times more products than those who just gave name and email. And my best guess is simply that they were more qualified, they were more interested, that if they're willing to give me their postal address, they probably trust me and like me a bit more than other people, believe in me and all that kind of stuff. So it's really valuable information to get out, even if you have no plans to do anything fancy with it, although there's a ton of money in all that fancy stuff.
Okay. So, because I know you work with small businesses and things like that. So, is this type of strategy, do you think it's applicable to like everyone across the board, or is it only for businesses that are selling hard goods and products or something like that?
No, I think it certainly can be used for just about any type of business. I mean, it's like everything where you've got to have an actual strategy in mind. You've got to sort of have a point to what you're doing and everything, but I can't really think of a business where you couldn't utilize this type of strategy.
Okay, so tell me about what's the best data to collect? There's obviously probably tons of different things you can do, but if you had to 80-20 it and pick the top few things aside from name and email, what would they be and why?
Great question. I think the first one's got to be direct mail, like postal address, simply because it allows you to send direct mail. It allows you to segment based on different areas and everything like that. And if you are doing direct mail and marketing that has a hard cost, you'll quickly find out that certain postcodes and suburbs and even whole states just don't buy anywhere near as much as other states. And so you can, for example, cut your costs very quickly just by not sending direct mail to certain states and postcodes that you've proven not to work. So that's definitely the first thing I would look at, is after you've got name and email address, start to get postal addresses. And then from there, if you're doing any kind of phone follow-up, obviously a phone number is really handy. If you're doing SMS marketing, it gives you a lot of other avenues like that. Though I'd say the next thing is going to be unique for every business, and that's the survey type of data. And that really comes down to figuring out, okay, what are the criteria in my business? Who are my ideal clients? What do they have in common? And what questions can I ask of people to help identify, who our ideal clients are? So I was just modeling someone else's funnel the other day, and they sell basically vending machines. It's a vending machine business opportunity. And one of their survey questions on their opt-in form is, what liquid assets do you have available to you? And the options go from everything from like $3,000 up to $1 million or more. And so that's obviously one of their big criteria, is how much money you've got to invest. And obviously the people who, say $1 million or more are going to get routed to their best salespeople. They're going to get the most attention. They're probably going to get the most in terms of follow-up and spend in terms of trying to get them as a client, because they're going to be worth the most over the long haul. So the key is to figure out what data would be most valuable for you to get from your prospects, and then go about actively trying to collect it.
Okay, so how would you go about finding that data? How do you figure that stuff out?
I guess one way is looking at if you've got an existing business, is to look at your current ideal clients and figure out what do they have in common. So for my consulting business, for example, I found almost every single one of my best clients were in the $2 to $10 million gross sales range. We found anything below that, and they were just, too messy. They didn't have sales systems in place. They didn't have sales teams. It was just too chaotic. Anything above that, and there was too many levels of management and bureaucracy and all that kind of stuff. So $2 to $10 million gross revenue was one of my big criteria. Whether they were spending money on marketing was another big criteria. How many employees? If they had about 2 to 10 employees, seemed to be the sweet spot. So they're the things I figured out, and that's part of what I've taught my consulting tycoon students as well, is to look for those things. And you can certainly ask those type of questions at various stages in your opt-in process.
Okay, that's really good. What about, you mentioned doing surveys before you ask them, what the most painful problem in the business is. Do you have like a set of go-to questions that you use when you're surveying prospects or customers about that type of thing?
Yeah, my absolute favorite one is very similar to what you just said, is what's the biggest challenge in your business right now? I've asked that question so many times in so many different contexts, and or you can ask if you're selling weight loss info, it's, what's your biggest challenge in losing weight right now? That type of a question, it gets you such good data, because it's, we're in the business of solving problems. Almost any business you're in, you're really in the business of solving people's problems and the marketing of that. And so that question really gets to the heart of what it is that, people are struggling with, and gives you really great insights into how you can help them. So that's certainly my big go-to question.
What sort of answers do you get to that type of question? Give us some examples.
Yeah, sure. It's really funny. I mean, you'll get answers everything from 1 word or 2 words, getting clients or, productivity type of things, to like 300, 400 word kind of mini essays about people's, failed business experience and how they invested 50 grand in the stock market and lost it all. And they've been doing internet marketing for 3 years and haven't made a cent. That's paraphrased from one I got just last week. And obviously the people who write the most in there, they're generally the most qualified, because they've got the biggest pain. They're sharing it with you. They're seeing you as an outlet and as someone who can potentially help them. So you'll get a really big range of answers, and I find them all useful in one way or another. But some of them are certainly highlight who those people with the bigger problems and pains really are.
Right. I mean, I've had some amazing results doing that with email. Is when you send out, someone signs up to the list, and you probably just got this email because you just signed up, and it comes out and it will ask you a couple of questions. I've done this in a bunch of different markets where it says, like, what is your ideal transformation, and what is the biggest fear you have in relation to that. And people instantly say, talk about their goal, they want to lose 50 pounds, and then they tell you why they feel they can't, because they're afraid of it, they're afraid of success, or vegetables are disgusting, or whatever the case is. And you're absolutely right. Some people will give you these huge responses that show that they're really desperate for a solution. And what happens is that there is so much fodder, so much food in these responses, that you can go and create endless content to help them solve those problems.
And that's exactly what I do. Like every survey I get, whether I'm using that data directly or not, it always comes back as email fodder. And I get this pretty much every single week. Someone will respond, and their response is something along the lines of, I can't believe how much you're talking directly to me, like how closely everything you're talking about matches my experience. And it's because I'm just feeding back to the market what they're telling me. They tell me their biggest problem is X. I write an email about how the biggest problem in the market is X. And they're like, wow, how do you know this stuff, kind of thing. It's like, well, you guys told me what the problems are. I'm just repeating it.
Right. I mean, it's amazing. I got that whole email thing from, I think it's Clay Collins and then Andre Chaperone. They both do versions of it. And it's, after doing that, it made me realize that great copy it's about understanding the customer. So you go and do a ton of research, you're going to have great copy, even if you're not a copywriter. I've heard things where Rami Sethi does 50 to 60% of his time on research. Same thing with Eugene Schwartz. And I think this is what people really need to understand, that good emails and good copy and good sales letters, it's really just really good research, and that's it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I'm doing a persuasive writing program at the moment, and we're into the 3rd week, and we haven't mentioned like copywriting or any kind of tactics or even copywriting strategies. It's all been gathering research. It's been figuring out who our ideal clients are. It's been going into forums and doing surveys and figuring out the language they use. It's going into looking at our USP and the features and advantages and benefits and transformation our products and services provide. Because that is copywriting. I think there's a lot of great copywriting courses out there, but unless you're planning to be like an A player ninja copywriter, I think a lot of them do more harm than good, because they break things down into so many different layers and categories and put so many different names on things that it's a full-time job just to try and learn what copywriting is. Seriously, it does people's heads in. And if you take more than one copywriting course, you'll find that at least half of the course contradicts the other one. And people have come to me and they're like, man, I've tried to learn copywriting for the past 3 years and I just can't do it. And the real secret, like you said, is just doing that research and knowing your prospects, knowing them better than they know themselves. And you can do that because when you ask, 10 people or 100 people, what's your biggest problem? Why haven't you solved it right now? And what would your ideal solution look like? And you can compile them into, a customer avatar of the average of all that stuff. You're now communicating to people, 80% to exactly what their current situation is, and the 20% that they couldn't quite articulate for themselves. And that's all copywriting is. And Andre, I think, has said this himself, that he hasn't taken a single copywriting course, yet he's one of the best email copywriters, I've seen out there. And it's simply because he knows, and I've mostly seen his work in the internet marketing niche, he knows that market so well because he's surveyed them and he's been in the market and he was one of them, kind of thing. And that's all copywriting is being able to empathize with people and talk on their level. That's 80 or 90% of it right there.
Right. And it's funny when people finally understand that. It's like, that's really simple. And all I got to do is just go out and do some surveys, and then I'm going to have a good email or a good sales letter.
Yeah, and that's where, we've got all these copywriting formulas and structures and everything, and a lot of the time they're more confusing than helpful. But once you've got all this survey data and, you've literally copied and pasted people's pains and frustrations from an Amazon review or from a blog or from a forum or whatever, and you look at all this stuff and then start to hang it off one of these, AIDA type formulas, it all starts to make sense because you've now got, you're not trying to just make up words. You're not trying to be a copywriter and use a technique or use a tactic or anything. You're just, repeating to the market what they said their problems were, what would get their attention, what they would be interested in. And it's like, I don't know, I get frustrated with people because it should be so easy and everyone's trying to complicate it to be something that it really isn't.
Yeah. Totally. So what about after they've signed up, you've done the survey, you've collected their address and all that thing, what do you start sending them via email? What's your advice there?
The first thing would be to actually send emails. And it sounds silly, but man, when I first got my Aweber account, it was probably 6 months before I even started building a list, and probably another 6 months before I started mailing that list. And I've heard people, who have been paying $300 a month for Infusionsoft for a year and still haven't, sent a single email to their list. So the very first thing is just start sending anything. It almost doesn't matter what it is. You're probably not going to send out great stuff right from the start because, it takes practice to get good. So just start sending anything. That'd be my very first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is, start repeating back to the market what you've learned from your research, like we've just been talking about. Is, my favorite strategy at the moment is basically just telling my story, either talking about stuff that happened to me, in terms of how I got to where I am now, or stuff that happened to me today, and just, drawing analogies and metaphors about my everyday life and turning that into a business lesson, and then, having the order link to my sales letter. And that works like crazy. It's just so powerful. It's not funny.
It's funny you mentioned that. I mean, that's what Ben Settle does. That's what another guy, John McCulloch, does. And Jay White, and all of them. It's all about this stories. You can pick up anything that happened today, and then if you're creative enough, you can kind of turn it into like a parable or like Aesop's fables, like a little story that ties into something, and then it's like, well, here's the reason you should buy my product. And it sounds simple, but it's so easy and so powerful.
And that's it. And I've been talking about this a lot in my course at the moment. The fact that information and content is great, but you're only going to keep people interested in your content for a couple of minutes at most. In most cases, what people are drawn to are other people. And we've been passing on information via stories for hundreds, if not thousands, of years. And it's literally hardwired into us to pay attention when people tell a story, to bond with people when they tell a story. It flies under the sales radar a lot of the time. Even when people kind of know you're selling in your emails, they give you a lot of leeway when you're telling a story because it's interesting and it's fascinating. And people generally aren't going to buy from you unless they kind of like you, unless they trust you, and stories let you do that. And you'll quickly find I did this early on, I tried to teach in my emails and I gave great content, and I couldn't sell a single thing by doing that because the wrong people were interested. The buyers got bored because they'd heard all the content before. The time-sucking vampires who just wanted to get every piece of information out of your brain loved it, but they just wouldn't buy a thing. And the moment I started switching over to a more story-based approach, like Ben does, like Matt Fury does, sales absolutely skyrocketed. The better buyers are much more interested, and the freebie seekers get off your list a lot quicker, which is fantastic.
Reminds me of, content marketing is all the rage lately with everyone's just saying content and put out great blog posts and great emails and teach and teach and teach. I think Ben says it really well when he says that teachers, in our society, none of them are rich. And
exactly.
I think that says it all. It's like teachers, they teach, but they don't sell. And if you want to be rich, you have to learn how to sell. And that's where all this story stuff comes in.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, at the end of the day, you can get content anyway. You go into Google, you type your problem, you type what you're looking for. You can find 1,000 people who are teaching it. So teaching something, unless you've got something just so amazing that, no one else has it, or it's such a breakthrough idea that it kind of differentiates you. Unless you have that, you're just sounding like anyone else. If you're talking about email marketing and you're talking about how to set up a list on Aweber and what the steps are, that's really tough sell. But if you wrap that in a story, that's going to connect you with people. And even if they don't really care about the actual technical thing of what you're talking about, the fact that you wrapped it in a story will keep them interested, and most importantly, get them opening your next email as well. Because that's also the battle. Is it's not just about getting one email open and read. It's about keeping people engaged and interested, and reading emails and buying from them consistently.
Absolutely. Right. Okay. Now, there's one last thing I want to ask before we'll have to wrap it up in a minute, and that is when I've sat down, because I'm a copywriter too. So when I write a sales letter or an email, there are times when I don't know what to write, and I basically writer's block. And I'm sitting there and I'm staring at the cursor, and I write a sentence and I delete it. Then I write another one and I delete it, and it's really, really hard going. And I think a lot of people have this problem. They're all excited about these ideas. They go and take a course like Autorespond to Madness or something like that, and then they sit down and they can't execute. So how do you help your consultants that you train? How do you help them get past those roadblocks, this writer's block?
Okay, there's two kind of levels to my answer. The first one is a lot of that sort of writer's block and not knowing what to write. In my experience, a lot of it comes down to the fact that you haven't done enough research. You haven't done the research to the point where you know the market better than they do. You've got ideas spilling out of your head. It's not about you don't know what to write. It's about choosing which thing to write. That's often the biggest thing, is that if you haven't done the research, you're just not going to know what to write, and you're going to stare at the blank page. And a lot of that also comes with practice, writing every day, making writing a habit. Like I said before, you're not going to write a great email the very first time you sit down to write one. It's just, unless you're naturally gifted and you just haven't figured it out yet, it's not going to happen. Most people, it takes practice. I look back at the emails I used to write, and, I'm embarrassed. I look back at emails I wrote a month ago and I'm like, man, I can't believe I sent that. But it probably got me a bunch of sales, and, it worked. So that's the first part of my answer. The second part is there's nothing wrong with swiping. Don't go and steal someone else's exact email, but, go and look at what 10 other people are doing and get an idea of, the structure they've used, and take that same structure, but just use your own, story and use your own introduction. But be very strict in terms of following the structure. And like I've swiped sales letters and emails and lots of other things from people and showed it like to the copywriter who I swiped, and they haven't picked that I swiped their stuff because I only swiped the structure. And if you kind of break, a sales letter or an email down, there's only so many sort of effective structures out there. And so once you have changed all the actual words, there's not too much to actually show that you swiped any one particular piece. So, and I try and teach that to my students. I teach them how to swipe, and people still get caught up on trying to be too creative and trying to do everything themselves. And that will come in time. Once you've got to a point where you've been writing emails for a while, you'll get to the point where you can just sit down and write an email, and you'll have the structure sort of naturally come out, and you'll kind of know what to say, and you'll know how the flow goes. And frankly, I only just feel like I'm getting to that point in the last couple of months. Yeah. But at the start, there's nothing wrong with swiping, a structure and swiping sort of the template of what someone else has done, and that will give you a massive leg up.
Okay, that's great advice. Fantastic, Guy. Well, thank you. Thanks for coming on the show, on the Email Marketing Podcast. Before we go, give yourself a plug and tell everyone where they can find you and where they can buy your stuff.
Yeah, check out consultingtycoon.com. You can see I write a daily email there, my Daily Secrets Club. I do a weekly video sort of podcasty type thing as well, and you can check out all the different products and services I've got on there. But get on my list. The emails are, you'll learn a lot from them, even if you don't decide to buy anything.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I'll have links to your site down in the show notes there. Thanks again, and talk to you soon.
My pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you want to discover more insider tips, tricks, and secrets about driving sales with email marketing, sign up for daily email tips from the autoresponder guy. Go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast. Sign up, confirm your email address, and I'll send you daily emails on how to improve your email marketing and make more sales via email. You'll find out why open rates don't matter and the 7-letter word that underlies all effective marketing and much more.